Hey everyone, and thanks again for tuning in to our short videos about multifamily. Today, we're going to talk about 9 income generating ideas for multifamily owners. My name is Joseph Gozlan. I'm from Eureka Business Group, and my email is joseph@ebgtexas.com in case you have any questions at the end of this presentation. Before we dive into the actual income generating ideas, I want to take a minute and talk about the power of force appreciation. As multifamily owners, we have the power to control the value of our property. Unlike single family properties that are being valued using the comps system, which means your value is being set by the comparable sales in the market, multifamily owners can control their own property value. And the way to do that is by increasing our NOI, the net operating income. If you're not familiar with the way multifamily is being evaluated or what the NOI is, please check our YouTube channel for the other videos to see how we calculate NOI and how we calculate property values. Well, given a submarket cap rate is set, right, we don't control the cap rate. What we can do is force the property value up by increasing the net operating income. There's really 3 ways to increase your NOI for your property. The first one is increase in income, which is what this presentation today is going to talk about. The other one is reducing expenses, because net operating income is a total income less total expenses from the operational side of things. And the third way, and a little bit uncommonly talked about, is increasing your occupancy rate, because that inevitably drive up your income. Let's jump into our income generating ideas. Well, the first one is pretty obvious. Increase your rents to the market level. If you buy a property or you have a property that is way under market because you were not following up on market rents or the previous owner didn't, you want to raise your rents to the market level. First, make sure that you don't violate any rules and you follow your leases, and you only raise your rents when the leases are up. This will, if your leases are staggered across the year, that shouldn't be too much of a problem. They should not generate too much vacancy, which leads us to the next item is don't raise it by too much too fast. If you're $100-$200 below market on a C-class property, these kind of tenants usually cannot take a $200 hit in a month. So work with your tenants, make your rents go up reasonably if you're not generating a lot of value to the tenants, right? So if you renovate the units and you make the entire property, you have a lot more amenities, then this is not really a raise your rents. This is more of a rehab value add play. So pay attention to what your plans are and how it works with your current tenant base and your desired tenant base. The other way is to charge pet rent. You're not being greedy by charging pet rents. You are just being reasonable because having pets in an apartment does generate more tear and wear. Pets have accidents, pets have a tendency to chew on things, and sometimes this costs more to maintain. So first of all, make sure your area supports it. And by that, it means that other properties around you charge pet rent as well. Being the only property that charges pet rent in a submarket might prove as a little bit of a challenge. The other thing is make it part of the contract. It has to be spelled out in the contract so you can enforce it. And then the last thing, and that is happening to a lot of property owners that are not using a property management company that is diligent about these things, follow through on your collecting. If you have pet rent in the lease and they have a pet in the property, make sure you collect that rent as well. Our next income generating idea is placing vending machines on your property. You can go to Costco's or Sam's Club or any one of those big bulk warehouse type of retail stores and buy a lot of cans and water bottles or snacks and just stack your machines over the time. That usually works better when you have full-time staff, so bigger properties, 75, 100 and more units. If you have a smaller property, it might not be worth your time to just go through the hustle of restocking the machines and collecting the coins and so on. then consider using a third-party vendor to do that for you. The next one is one of the biggest ways you can get some of your money back is implementing RUBS. RUBS is ratio utility billing. We're going to have a whole separate video about this in the coming months. But in general, just a quick overview, this is a way for you to charge back utilities that you're paying for back into your tenant. So if you only have one water meter and you're paying the water bill for the entire building, there is a set of rules and regulations that allows you to charge some of it back to your tenants based on the size of the units and how many people live in every unit and so on. So that's where the ratio comes from. So the first thing I would say about it is use a third-party company that specializes in RUBS. There's a ton of local and state and other rules and regulations that you have to follow, and unless that's your job, I would shy away from going into trouble by missing some of those rules. Following through on collections is the same like the pet rent, right? Make sure that you give your tenant a bill for the rent and the ratio utility, and that you follow through to make sure you collect that from them. I can't stress enough, follow the local rules and regulations. Every city, every county, every state might have different rules, and you gotta make sure that you follow through on every one of them. You can get in trouble for that. And then last thing, make sure this is spelled out in their lease. You cannot just jump into a property you just bought and make everybody pay their ratio utility if they're in the middle of a lease and the lease said they would not pay for that. Very important. This is a very big income generating item for older properties that have single water meter or a single gas meter, single electricity meter. All bills paid properties could really use that. One caveat to that is make sure that everybody in your submarket do that. If you're the only property that charge backs for utility and everybody else is all bills paid, you can't charge the same rent. You still can do the RUBS on your property, but you'll have to lower your rent so the total the tenant would have to pay remains about market level. So halfway through, and our next item is charging for reserved or covered parking. Well, let's start that if your property doesn't have any created reserved parking or covered parking, some areas would rather have one or the other, is something that really goes well in the B and C class properties where tenants would like to protect their cars. If you don't have garages, covered parking is really great for them. So that's a big income generator in a lot of the properties. You'll have to keep up with striping and markings, right? If you make someone use reserved slot number 9, it needs to be clear which one is reserved slot number 9 for him and everybody else on the property. And then lastly, you'll have to enforce violations, right? If you have reserved parking and you charge money for that, somebody else parks in their spot, you gotta help them resolve that problem. You gotta enforce your violators to make sure, hey, this is a reserved parking. If you want one, you'll have to pay for it. Otherwise, get your car out of that spot. On the same note, you can always add storage units and storage areas and charge monthly fees for that. Now, some properties have the room for that. Some properties find creative ways to do things like that. You can put shipping containers on the back of your parking lot. If you have space, you can take the basement and build lockers or semi bigger boxes in there to generate storage areas. Different areas use different ways to generate storage, but the one thing I know right now is everybody needs more storage because the units are not so big and people will have the tendency to accumulate property. One more thing, and that goes back to a lot of the things we talked about, is verify your local laws and regulation. If your zoning doesn't permit putting storage units on your property, you cannot put storage units on your properties. You can get fines. So make sure whatever you choose to do is adhering to the local laws and regulation. So wrapping up our 9 with the last 3, you can set up a billboard sign and charge for advertising. If you have a highly visible location, like on a major traffic road or on an intersection that has two major roads on it, you can put a sign on it and charge for advertising. And if you have downtimes between advertisers, you can always leverage your advertising billboard to advertise your own property if you have leasing units and so on. There are also third-party media companies that will buy the right to use your advertising, and then they go around and resell that space for other advertisers. One more way to get more out of your property is to offer washer dryer units. If you have a property that the units have hookups for washer and dryer, instead of making the tenants buy their own, because a lot of them don't have either the funds to go out and buy $600-700 appliances, or they're just not interested because next year or 2 years from now they plan on being somewhere else, like millennials. So you can charge 40, 45. I've seen places that charge all the way up to $50 and $60 per month for, and that generates a lot of extra income on a monthly basis for you. And on the same note, you can also offer an upgraded appliances package for a fee, right? So if everybody else on the property is white, you can offer a black appliances package, or if everybody's black, you can offer a stainless steel appliances package. And you'd be surprised how many people actually want that extra feel of this is a nicer place, it's a nicer apartment, it's a nicer appliances for me to use. And then a little trend that I've noticed recently is people offering wireless monitored alarms. So in the old days, you had to do wiring and it was a pain, it was just not worth it to go through all the hustle to offer a security system. But with security systems like Simply Safe or Smith Thompson, there's a lot of wireless cellular hookups that basically all you have to do is just place the system on the wall and a couple of sensors on the windows and doors, and that's it. Not a lot of maintenance, not a lot of drilling into the walls and creating infrastructure for that. And it helps at least certain tenants feel safer that they have this thing. So if the security system company charges you $17-20 a month, you can upgrade that to a 30-40, because that will include the installation of the hardware and so on. So this is it. I'd like